And good evening, and welcome to this edition of Ekoshala Web Show session with Dr. Abhilasha Baharani on managing uveitic cataract and combined cataract vitrectomy cases. Let me just give a brief introduction about Dr. Abhilasha. She is currently working as a consultant ophthalmologist and UVA specialist at Neo Retina Eye Care Institute, Hyderabad. She has completed her fellowship in uveitis and ocular inflammation from Arvind Eye Hospital, Madurai. She has completed her second fellowship in ocular inflammatory disease in vitreoretinal disorders from Royal Victoria Eye and Ear Hospital, Dublin, Ireland. She has published in international peer-reviewed journals and is an invited speaker at national and state conferences. Her main areas of interest are uveitis and ocular immunology, phaco and small pupil, complicated cataract, and ocular manifestation of systemic diseases. With this, I would like to welcome Dr. Abhilasha. Over to you, madam.
Thanks, Mr. Suhas, for the introduction and the opportunity. I'll be sharing my presentation right away.
Yes, ma'am.
So, as we know, today we'll be talking about managing uveitic cataracts and combined cataract vitrectomy surgeries. So these two are a little challenging things for new cataract surgeons as well as those with experience. So I'll share my experience with them. First, we'll talk about uveitic cataracts. So it's a bit of a juggle when we treat uveitic cataracts because we have to keep multiple things in mind. There is preoperative assessment of the patient, which is very important. Then there are intraoperative challenges and techniques that need to be learned, and post-operative complications and their management. So I'll be broadly speaking about these three topics. Coming first to the preoperative assessment and preparation. So before we take up any patient for surgery, we need to assess the risks involved. So first, but these risks are more in case of uveitic cataracts because you can be faced with small pupils. You can be faced with a lot of intraocular inflammation. There might be coexisting glaucoma. There might be retinal problems like cystoid macular edema, and there might be complicated cataract, of course. So the risk factors for post-operative hypotony should be kept in mind because this is the most important factor which determines the prognosis of the surgery. So if the intraocular pressure is less than 6 millimeters of mercury, even when the eye is quiescent, there's a high chance that the patient might get into post-operative hypotony, which is very difficult to manage and may even lead to phthisis. Seclusia pupil with a normal intraocular pressure is again a danger sign. See, when the pupil is totally closed and still the intraocular pressure is normal, that means the eye, the ciliary body are not quite functional. So this is another danger sign. In cases where the uveitis is difficult to control is again a challenge in itself. Preoperatively, if you are able to see the fundus and you are able to do the OCT and you find that the choroid is thickened, or you do a B scan and you see choroidal effusion, in such cases also it's better to control the inflammation first before taking up for surgery. Then next is the assessment of visual potential, which is very important. Most importantly, optic nerve. We often miss seeing the optic nerve, and sometimes the signs are also very subtle. Now, if you see, this is the right and the left optic nerve of the same patient, and you see there's a subtle temporal pallor, which might be missed. So therefore, checking for a pupillary response and color perception is very important. If possible, do a visual fields. Now, this is the right visual field of the same patient, and this is the left eye. Now you are seeing a central scotoma there, which is never caused by a cataract. So this should ring an alarm bell. Coming to the assessment of the macula, which is very important. We must assess the scar, and we must tell the patient how good his vision will be after surgery. If there is an ERM or there is a CME that has to be treated first. The timing of surgery in case of uveitic cataracts is very important. The general guideline is that the eye should be quiet for 3 months. Sometimes urgent surgery is required, especially in cases where there is iris bombay and the cataract is mature, or you need to remove the cataract to see the posterior segment better. In such cases, an urgent surgery may be performed, but in such cases, a preoperative intravenous methylprednisolone 1 day prior to surgery should be given to control the inflammation. Preoperative preparation of the patient is important. Steroid prophylaxis of 1 milligram per kg 3 days preoperatively tapered to preoperative levels over 1 month is recommended. This decreases the risk of postoperative CME. Periocular steroids may be used. A posterior subtenon triamcinolone, 40 milligram in 1 ml can be given if there are no contraindications like steroid response or infectious uveitis. Though personally, I don't prefer giving periocular steroids just before surgery because I feel there is a risk of infection is increased. Systemic steroids would be better. Topically, predacetate can be used 2 hourly with non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drops 2 days prior to surgery. And in cases of infectious uveitis with a propensity to reactivate, prophylaxis can be given, especially in cases of toxoplasmosis and herpetic uveitis. Patient counseling is of paramount importance. This need not be overemphasized. We all know it. We have to tell the patient about his or her visual prognosis depending upon the pre-op findings. Surgery may take longer than usual. Many a times while you're operating, there are additional procedures involved in uveitic cataracts like using pupil expanders, and patient might become anxious on table like why my surgery is taking so long. So they have to be counseled about that. And we have to tell the patient about a possibility of delayed visual recovery because sometimes post-operatively the patient might develop inflammation or a CME. So we have to explain those things clearly before surgery. Compliance with medication is very important and patient has to be told about that. Sometimes patients with ocular TB, when you do cataract surgery on them, they think they need not take that. So this has to be explained clearly before surgery. Most of our patients are young patients. Uveitic cataract, sometimes patients are quite young and they are not used to wearing reading glasses. So they have to be told beforehand that if they will go for monofocal lenses and they'll need reading glasses post-operatively. And next, if we are using, although hydrophilic lenses are not preferred, but if the patient is not able to afford and we have to use a hydrophilic lens, the chance of posterior capsular opacification has to be explained. Coming to the intraoperative challenges and techniques. So the surgical challenges are posed by the small pupil, the shallow AC, posterior synechiae, peripheral anterior synechiae, pupillary membranes, and zonular lysis. So I'll be sharing my short videos and we'll show how to tackle these problems. So the choice of surgery is phacoemulsification. I prefer phacoemulsification even in mature cataracts because it causes less inflammation. When there is cataract and glaucoma, then cataract surgery should be performed first, followed by glaucoma filtration surgery. Because if you do a combined case, so post-operative inflammation might itself lead to failure of the glaucoma filtration surgery. So it's better to do cataract first, and maybe after a month, the glaucoma surgery can be done. When there is a coexisting cataract and a retinal problem like an ERM, a combined surgery is better. So we generally do under local anesthesia because there is a lot of handling of the iris that is involved. So a retrobulbar or a peribulbar or a subtenon anesthesia can be used. I personally prefer a subtenon block. So I'll share a video.
Hello?
Okay.
Hello?
Hello?
Yes.
There is no video visible, ma'am.
Yeah. Now can you see?
No, ma'am.
The video is visible, ma'am.
Video is visible now?
Yeah, we can see video.
Yes, we can.
Okay. So I am making a tunnel here. I'll explain why I'm making a tunnel, a clear corneal tunnel. So here we see a bogged down pupil. Okay, there is a total posterior synechiae with a complicated cataract. So we'll need to use iris hooks in this case. So for the incision, I had put a initial mark with an 11 number blade, and then I have made a small tunnel there in the clear corneal tunnel. Coming to the next video. So we need to expand the pupil. So first we have to release the synechiae. We have to release the iris from the lens capsule. So I'm using an iris spatula, and we have released the posterior synechiae. So still the pupil does not dilate much. So now we are going to put the iris hooks. So I'm using an MBR blade. Now here I would like to mention that it's important to go straight into the cornea. You need not make a tunnel here, because the iris hooks have stops which can just stop the incision from leaking. So there's no need to make a long tunnel. Now here I usually make a diamond with the hooks. So here I had made a tunnel, a corneal tunnel. Now I'm going under the tunnel. I'm going at a deeper plane than the tunnel to make the incision for the iris hooks. I hope that is clear. So now we are inserting the hooks one by one. I'll tell you why I have made this yes. So I'll tell you why I have inserted the iris hooks just under the main tunnel. Once we do the surgery, it's very helpful if you're right below the main tunnel. We should not be tightening the iris hooks. We'll do that in stages. So we have just put the iris hooks in position, and now one by one we are going to tighten it and expand the pupil. Yes. Be very gentle. Yes. So slowly we have expanded the pupil adequately. So here I'll just show Dr. Arup Chakrabarty's video on YouTube about complications of iris hooks, why we must be gentle and careful. So now in this video, if you see, there is a ballooning of fluid. This is an intumescent cataract, and the iris hook has punctured the lens capsule. Now again, now when the chopper came out, there is injury to the iris and there is bleeding. You can see the bleeding there. So because of the iris hooks, there's tenting of the iris, and we have to be very careful by taking the instrument in and out. Now this is the same case. There's a lot of bleeding which had to be managed separately. So be very gentle while inserting and removing iris hooks. Now here see again. Yeah, so a bit of the iris has been taken out. So that's why it's very important to be gentle while inserting and removing iris hooks. Now coming to why I use the iris hooks just below the main incision. Now if you see this example, they have used iris hooks at a location that is different from the main incision. So when you are getting in with the phaco probe, again you are, you have to, every time you have to touch the tented iris, the iris will be pulled up. So while you are entering with your phaco probe, you are likely to damage the iris. So that's why I use the iris hooks just below the main incision so that the iris is not damaged. So this is the incision. This is my main incision. I hope you are able to see. And this is the incision that I use for the iris hook. So just under that plane. Okay. So that's why I made a small tunnel first. Okay. So below that tunnel, I have entered directly for the iris hook. Now, Malyugin ring is also used for small pupils, but somehow this is not, I don't find it very useful for uveitic cataracts because the pupil is very irregular. So this Malyugin ring in my personal experience is better when you have a regular pupil. At least, because sometimes it just gets stuck on one part of the pupil and the expansion is not proper. So if you have like a case of a patient with Flomax, maybe in them it is good, but for uveitic cataracts, I haven't found it very useful. So this is how you insert it. Yeah. And the expansion is also less than the iris hooks. In Malyugin ring, the expansion is not as large as you get it in a iris hook. So this is another video by Dr. Prathamesh where they are using Coughlin hooks in a case of small incision surgery. But because I never do small incision in a uveitic cataract, so, and here again the pupil expansion is not as predictable as you get in iris hooks. So continuing with the same case, I'll show the capsular rhexis. So rhexis has to be as large as possible. If you have capsule forceps, it is better. It is more, the capsular rhexis is more controlled. But with experience, you can learn doing with the needle also, rhexis needle. So here I'm trying to make a large rhexis as much as I can. If you see, the pupil expansion is very good with iris hooks. Coming to the nuclear management, many of these cases you get soft cataract, so it's not difficult to manage the cataract per se. So here I'm doing the irrigation aspiration. Yeah, so now we see a lot of posterior capsular cortex, which is very common, especially in young patients. And therefore PC polishing is very important, and it's very thick and just stuck to the posterior capsule. So I'm just trying to remove this, and this is going to take time more than the surgery. It's the polishing that takes time sometimes. But it's important to be thorough so that you don't have to face a very early PCO. So more than aspiration, I'm just trying to loosen up the cortex that is stuck there so that I can find an end where I can pull it. So I'm just rubbing the posterior capsule to detach those fibers. Yes, so finally I caught an end, and now we are able to remove the, yes. So now it's done. Moving on to the next step. So this is insertion of the intraocular lens. So I generally prefer a hydrophobic acrylic lens because the chances of PCO is less. Now I'm going under the intraocular lens and removing the viscoelastic. So we have to take every effort to try to minimize the chance of PCO. So we have done a thorough visco cleanup. Now removal of the iris hooks, this is important. So you just have to rotate the hook and remove it. Yes. So loosen the stopper. Be gentle because the iris is very fragile in these cases. Yes. So we rotate and remove. So we have a lot of, we have about 6 wounds that need to be hydrated, 6 or 7 wounds to be hydrated. Yeah, that's the end of the case. So
Video.
I beg your pardon?
The video in between had stopped. That's okay.
No, I just forwarded the video. You want? I was just closing the wound, so I just forwarded the video. I think we have just 1 hour, right? So
Yeah, fine.
Yeah.
Everything is okay.
Yeah, thank you. So now we'll come to the post-operative complications and management. So here the principle should be to over-treat and not try to under-treat. So whenever you're giving post-operative steroids, give a full course because excess post-operative inflammation is difficult to manage and it causes a lot of heartache for the patient. So if there is an associated CME, we have to treat with a periocular steroid injection and keep the pupil mobile. If you use cyclopentolate, I've seen a lot of people using cyclopentolate. Cyclopentolate can itself lead to inflammation by causing by causing prostaglandin release. So it's preferable to use homide. Homatropine, it keeps the pupil mobile if it is used in a BD dose. So we have to manage the intraocular pressure also. So if the pressure rises, it's easy to manage. Hypotony is something that is difficult to manage, and we have to increase the anti-inflammatory treatment. And in severe cases, even vitrectomy and trimming of the ciliary body traction may be required. PCO, as I explained before also, it's common. Capsulophimosis is also common. So it's important to make a large Rexus. Acrylic intraocular lenses with square edge optic designs are better. We have to remove the viscoelastic meticulously from the bag to reduce the chance of inflammation. And that's what I showed you when I was removing it from under the IOL. And post-operative inflammation has to be controlled with very high dose of steroids. Coming to the next topic, that is combined cataract vitrectomy. So I'll only be dealing with the cataract part because I'm an anterior segment surgeon. Vitrectomy is done by my vitreoretinal colleagues. So what's special about a combined cataract vitrectomy? First thing is that patients usually have an underlying systemic disease like diabetes most commonly. So the pupillary dilatation is not usually adequate, and cataracts are usually more dense than what we see in a routine case without any systemic illness, without diabetes. And we are doing two procedures in one. So the incision is important. There are things that we have to keep in mind about the rexes. We have to make sure that the retina surgeon has a clear cornea while doing surgery. Intraocular power has to be adjusted, and there are certain points about irrigation and aspiration which I'll cover with my videos. So coming to the first case, this is a phaco-SOR in a case with previous uveitis. So you are seeing there is silicone oil sticking to the cornea, and there is posterior synechiae. So I'm just removing the silicone oil, and we are partially releasing the posterior synechiae as well. Now we have to release the posterior synechiae completely, and because there is no vitreous support, the anterior chamber is abnormally deep. So as I complete the rexus, the pupil again goes down. In these combined cases, the incision has to be watertight. So it's very important to make a slightly longer tunnel. And if you see, I'm making a longer tunnel and just at the limbus so that there is little bleeding at the limbal vessels. Yeah. Now, while doing the cataract, you just please notice the pupil. The pupil just keeps going down and then expands. So there is a little surge also, I agree. And there is pressure from the silicone oil. So there is continuous pressure from the silicone oil, and it's a challenge to operate at the iris plane in these cases. Now I was trying to remove the nucleus, but the epinucleus is just coming out from below. Yes. So we have removed all of the epinucleus, but nucleus is still remaining, and there is a silicone oil plaque on the posterior capsule that is visible. So now, pardon, is there any difficulty?
No, ma'am, you can continue, ma'am.
Okay. Okay, thanks. So now there is continuous bulging of the posterior capsule, and I'm finding it difficult to remove the nuclear pieces, and the pupil is also going down. I don't want to injure the iris in this case. So I decide to put the implant the IOL. And this is our sensor single piece being implanted. That's a silicone oil plaque which has to be removed by the retina surgeon with vitrector. It's not cortex there. So we are gently implanting the IOL, and we can see the two nuclear pieces still in the anterior chamber. In such cases, we cannot afford to compromise the posterior capsule. Adding some more viscoelastic, we'll gently dial the trailing haptic into the bag. So now after the IOL, now there is a scaffold. So at least it will keep the PC back, because the silicone oil has this buoyancy and it keeps coming up and bulges the PC. So it's sometimes very difficult to remove the cataract, especially once you have the epinuclear cushion is out. So now I have been able to remove the nuclear pieces, and we are hydrating the main incision to get a watertight closure. And now as the trocar is inserted, there is no shallowing of the AC. Coming to the next case, this is again a diabetic patient. Here, this is a case of vitrectomy with ERM peeling. So we are starting off with the cataract. Here it's important to make a smaller rhexis because many times the retina surgeon will inject an expansile gas or air or silicone oil, and you don't want the IOL to come out of the bag. So I'm trying to make a 4.5 mm rhexis. I'm trying to go under the pupil now because the pupil is not adequately dilated. You have to do an under the pupil rhexis. Again, the main incision has to be watertight. So we are entering at 30 degree to make a slightly longer tunnel. And with the chopper, I'm pushing the pupil margin and trying to get the piece out. Generally, we try not to use iris hooks in these cases. Sorry for the decentration from the video. Yeah. So in these cases, it's important to be quick because if the wounds are hydrated, they start, the closure is not good. And then again, the retina surgeon finds it difficult if the AC shallows. So we are removing the cortex from, you cannot see the edge, we have to go under the pupil. So these diabetic cases have very poor dilatation. Again, we are inserting the lens. Now, while removing the viscoelastic, we have to remove every small bit of cortex. If anything is left behind, there should not be any air bubble in the AC, which might hamper the view for the retina surgeon. So now we are seeing bits of cortex there as we are dialing the lens into the bag. So again, we go under the pupil, under the IOL, and we have to remove a bit of the viscoelastic and cortex. Again, we'll see the AC does not shallow while they are inserting the trocar. Coming to the next case. So this is a case of phaco with vitrectomy in a case of vitreous hemorrhage. So as cataract surgeons, we rely a lot on the red glow that we get. But these cases, there is no red glow. So generally, we don't need a Tryphan blue. But in this case, I have used a Tryphan blue. And in spite of that, while doing the rhexis, the view isn't great because there's absolutely no glow. We'll see later that the blood was actually sticking to the posterior capsule. So we are making a 4.5 mm capsular rhexis, and we have to make every effort that it's well centered. I haven't fast forwarded it. Okay. So again, incision is important. We'll make a long tunnel at the entry at the limbal vessels with slight bleeding, which helps in healing. The thorough hydrodissection and hydrodelineation. Hydrodelineation, and we are able to see the golden ring. So phaco goes on as usual, but we have to be prepared that there won't be any red glow to guide us about the rhexis margin. So there's no red glow it's difficult to see the rhexis margin. So it's important to operate at the iris plane so that the cornea is not injured. We need a clear cornea. And in these cases, I use a high vacuum and low energy. Again, so to minimize the surgical trauma. Thorough cortex cleaner. So here you are able to see that there is no glow. So we are taking our time. Again, implanting the lens. I'm just showing this step because some surgeons might be in the learning stage. So sometimes we are not taught how to load the lens, and suddenly you're in private practice and you have to learn. So removing the air bubble, every bit of cortex is important. Every bit of viscoelastic is important so that the retina surgeon has a clear view. So now if you can see that there is, blood that is sticking actually to the posterior capsule. So thorough removal of viscoelastic from under the IOL. It's important to remove the viscoelastic from near the angles, also sweep through from near the angle so that once you come out, the viscoelastic doesn't appear from the sides. Again, going under the IOL. I've tried to show all the steps as much as possible. So it's a watertight incision. And you can see the little bleeding there. Yes. Now coming to another challenging case. This case was a case of intumescent cataract. Now if you see, as I puncture the capsule, there is fluid that is leaking. You can see the fluid leaking there. So now I'm aspirating it with the same needle. I'm trying to aspirate the fluid from the intumescent cataract. So there are a lot of techniques to deal with such cataracts, but I prefer to do a double rhexis. So first I'm making a small rhexis. We are making a small rhexis, and then I'll make a bigger rhexis. Once we'll decompress the bag, I'll make a bigger rhexis. This is a small rhexis. So after I've started doing this double rhexis, I've never had the Argentinian flag sign. So it really helps. Now I'm aspirating the fluid with this a straight 26 gauge needle. So I'm decompressing the bag. I'm sorry for the poor centration. I did not realize while doing the case. So now we are making the main incision. Again, tunnel length should be adequate. There has to be bleeding. And I'm making a bigger rhexis. I'll show this bigger rhexis in another case also because this case, the centration is not good. So we are removing the nuclear pieces. It's important to be gentle and keep the bottle height up because in this case there is thrust from the silicone oil from behind. There is no vitreous, but because of its buoyancy, silicone oil keeps coming up. It's important to be at the iris plane. Just because there is bulge, PC bulge, we cannot go to the cornea. Though it was an intumescent cataract, it's not very hard, not too difficult to manage. So I prefer to make chop it into small chunks and remove one by one. I'm trying to show the entire case. So you are seeing that there is no cortical support behind. You just have the PC there. But if your machine doesn't give surge, it's good. You can manage these cases easily. So last piece is important. To go slow. Yes. So in these cases, the rhexis is important. To get a rhexis is important. So once you get the rhexis, phaco is just like any other phaco case. So here you are seeing I've made a 4.5 mm rhexis for a good 360-degree overlap of the IOL. Because many a times post-operatively you see the IOL, especially if you use a 3-piece lens, one haptic is out of the bag. Again, going under the IOL and cleaning the viscoelastic thoroughly. Making sure there's no more cortex left. Again, one final cleanup under the IOL. So again, trocar, there is no collapse of the AC. So in that case, I was not able to show the complete double rhexis. So here this is another case I've already made with good centration. I found this case video with a good centration. So here I'm aspirating the fluid from the capsule. So I've already made a small rhexis. So we have to cut the margin and then try to get a flap. Try to get a flap there. If you have Rexis forceps, it is much easier. But when you don't have, you should also be confident with this, because most of the hospitals you get this needle. Although we have capsule forceps, but sometimes the anterior chamber becomes very shallow when we are using the Rexis forceps, because we have to go through the main tunnel. So with the needle, we can do it from the side port. Here, one point I'd like to emphasize is that when you're doing the Rexis, make sure that the flap is not wrinkled. Because if the flap is wrinkled, there's a chance of Rexis running out. So now you see I'm not able to push because that flap is getting wrinkled. So now I'm trying to straighten it again and starting, yes, and pulling again. So every time, especially towards the end, you have to keep, smoothing out the flap so that it's not wrinkled, and then you get a good Rexis. So again, there is wrinkling. Again, I'm trying to straighten out the flap. Yes, and then you can pull it easily. Yes. That's done. So this case was a hard cataract. The previous one, the intumescent cataract that I had shown, had a softer nucleus, but this is a hard one. It's a diabetic patient, and we are not able to separate the posterior plate. So it's a bit of a struggle here. But I decided to show this case. It's quite a struggle. Mr. Suhas, do we have time to go through this case? This is going to take another, I think, another
Maybe you can just
5 minutes.
the point where any particular point you want to discuss. In this
Yes,
case.
yes. So this is a routine actually cataract. So I'm just forwarding the whole thing. So we have removed the cataract. That's all. This is just like any other case. So here you have to really dig in to get the cortex, because near the Rexis you don't find anything. Just going to the edges, and we are removing the cataract, removing the cortex. This is PC polishing, and this is the final thing, inserting the lens. That's all. So the take-home message for combined cataract vitrectomy cases, since the patients come with underlying systemic diseases, we have intraoperative challenges. So if there is a pupillary dilatation is not adequate, we can use a chopper to go under the pupil and get the nuclear pieces out. Cataract density is generally higher in these cases, but it's important to stay at the iris plane because the patient is undergoing 2 surgeries in one sitting. So we have to take care that the cornea is not damaged. 2 procedures in one. So incision, as I emphasized, the tunnel has to be longer and watertight. The capsular Rexis can be a slightly smaller, maybe about 4.5 or 5 mm Rexis, so that there is a good optic overlap. Corneal clarity, we have to be at the iris plane, minimize surgical trauma, and we try to use low energy and high vacuum settings. The IOL power has to be adjusted many a times because in these vitrectomized eyes, there is no vitreous support. So the IOL sits slightly posterior than the expected. So I add plus 0.5 to the power of the lens. And irrigation aspiration has to be thorough, with thorough removal of cortex, air bubbles, viscoelastic, so that the view is clear for the retinal surgeon. So thank you for the patient listening. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, thank you very much, ma'am. Now I request the surgeons to please unmute yourself and ask the question directly so that madam can answer those questions. So in the meanwhile, there's some questions in the chat box, ma'am. So I'll be asking those questions. So
Yes, sure.
maybe there's one. So there is one question. There's a couple of questions from Dr. Anusha.
Yes.
Anusha, ma'am, if you're able to, if you can unmute yourself and ask the question directly, it will be good, ma'am. Okay, so anyway, I'll just read out the question, ma'am, what madam has posted. So one is, hi, ma'am, which of the condition is the placement of IOL often contraindicated?
Yes, see, sometimes what happens, we are not able to determine the power that is required. One thing. Second thing, in pediatric cases, sometimes it's not in pediatric uveitic cases. Sometimes the inflammation is too much in children, and it's very difficult to manage the post-operative inflammation. In such cases, the IOL can be delayed to a later date.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So and there's a next question, ma'am, by Dr. Anusha only. Can you please explain regarding the management of PCO in such cases, ma'am?
Yeah, management of PCO is like any other case, except that there is no study to it. But I generally, if I see a PCO I put the patient on non-steroidal anti-inflammatory before doing the YAG capsulotomy. I feel that it really helps with that, because once you do a YAG cap in a case of uveitis, again, the inflammation is more severe than a routine case. So I generally give that's my personal tip.
Yeah.
To use a topical NaCID before doing a YAG capsulotomy.
Thank you, ma'am. In the meanwhile, I can request others to unmute and start asking questions directly to madam.
I can see some questions by.
Yeah, I will read out. I'll read out the question, ma'am, to you.
Yes.
Yeah. So there's one question from Dr. Anita. So there's a couple of questions. How to manage patient expectation in such cases? Okay, so madam is speaking about the uveitic cataracts. Yes, is the question about uveitic cataract? Yes, ma'am. Yes, okay. See, whenever I'm operating a uveitic cataract, I make sure that the patient has received adequate treatment. Many times what happens, we don't have a diagnosis. In uveitis cases, there is no diagnosis and you see a cataract. The temptation is to put the patient on steroids, control the inflammation somehow, and then do the cataract surgery. So that's not a good approach. It's important to know the diagnosis first. Suppose there is a case of granulomatous uveitis. Before surgery, I would like to know whether this is a case of sarcoidosis or this is a case of tuberculosis. Accordingly, I'll make every effort. If suppose it is TB, we'll make a diagnosis. We'll make a definitive diagnosis, especially if there is a cataract, and we control the inflammation with specific treatment, and only then go for surgery. Just for the surgery, controlling inflammation for 3 weeks with high dose steroid is not a good idea, because post-operatively it's very difficult to manage these cases. So once your inflammation is under control for a considerable length of time, the patient also gains confidence in you. That, okay, I had this disease for say 5-6 years, I keep getting these reactions, and the inflammation is under control, my diagnosis is clear, and then the patient is definitely more confident on you. If you're not comfortable in using the second part of the question from Dr. Anita, I can read it here. If the surgeon is not comfortable using rings or hooks, I think
ring is difficult to learn. First thing, it's not easily available. It's expensive. Hooks is very easy. You can actually, you can just see videos and learn, because in the learning stages, nobody gives you hooks to, on the patient. So now it's much easier for all of us to learn, because there are so many online platforms and so many videos on YouTube. So like I said, you can just use an MVR blade and just go directly in. It's just a mental block to go into the clear cornea. It's not difficult at all. We all know how to make a scleral tunnel. So once you learn how to make a scleral tunnel, going clear corneal is much easier than that. Please believe me, you can just see videos and learn to use hooks, because sometimes the uveitic cataracts are so bad, the pupil is totally closed. So in such cases, you have to use hooks. So I would suggest that please follow videos and learn to use hooks, because Coughlin hooks will not give a with a good dilation. Coughlin hooks or even Malaysian ring, they do not give a good. So iris hooks I would prefer in uveitic cases.
Thank you very much, ma'am. So there's a couple of more questions from Dr. Anita.
Yes, I'm just going
Dr.
to
Anita, ma'am, can you unmute yourself and ask the question, ma'am, Dr. Anita?
Or maybe I can read out her question.
Yeah, I will read out the question, ma'am, so that everybody is aware of the question. Then you can start answering.
Sure.
Right. So coming to the question which Dr. Anita has posted, post-op medical management is crucial in uveitic cases. What are your suggestions for managing the same?
Yes. In post-operatively, suppose in a normal cataract, if I generally give dexamethasone only for a week. But in case of uveitic cataract, I generally step up the oral steroid also 1 week before surgery. So I go 1 milligram per kg body weight 1 week before surgery. Post-operatively, I give a Predfort or I give Diflucor. Nowadays, I'm started using difluprednate because I think that the post-operative inflammatory control is very good, and this drug can be used like 2 hourly, 3 hourly. So the patient compliance is very good. And I also use Bromfenac or Nepafenac in every case pre-operatively, 1 week pre-operatively, and we continue in the post-operative period for at least 6 weeks. And the topical steroid taper is very slow. So if I'm giving difluprednate, I give 6 times a day for 1 week, then 4 times a day for 1 week, then 3 times a day for 1 week, then twice a day for 2 weeks, and once a day for 2 weeks. So the taper is very slow. So once there is a slow taper, and again I give homatropine, homide, twice a day for 5 days post-operatively. So that way the pain control and inflammation control is good.
Thank you, ma'am. So next question is how to manage raised IOP post-surgery.
Yeah, that's a good question. So now first, why we have to find out why did the intraocular pressure rise post-surgery. So if the patient is a steroid responder, then I will switch to another drug, probably loteprednol, and we'll increase the oral steroid dose and go and do a slow taper. If sometimes the post-operative inflammation is high, and that itself can cause increase in IOP, so that you will know when you are seeing the patient. So generally it is a steroid response post-operatively, and I would prefer to give, we have to avoid prostaglandin analogs. So I will give maybe a timolol with a brimonidine to control the intraocular pressure, along with oral Dimox, maybe 250 mg BD. And generally, if you are able to control the inflammation, even if you are using difluprednate, if you reduce the dose to say 3 times a day, also difluprednate, and give anti-glaucoma drugs like a brimonidine and a timolol combination with an oral Dimox or you can give IOPAR SR, which is a slow release, and you can control it for 1 week. Then subsequent weeks are not difficult to manage. You can slower the taper. Suppose 3 times a day difluprednate for 2 weeks, and then 2 times for 2 weeks, and once for 2 weeks, like that. So we can reduce the steroid dose and increase the duration along with anti-glaucoma drugs.
Thank you, ma'am. There's a couple of questions from Dr. Shruti. Ma'am, if you can unmute yourself and ask the question, it will be good, ma'am. Dr. Shruti. Yeah. So the question is like, is there any preferred phaco chop technique in such cases?
Phaco chop, see, if there is a normal grade 2 cataract, you can do a direct chop. But I know I might sound little, but when there is a hard cataract with a thick posterior plate, so sometimes it becomes very difficult to, chop and separate the two pieces. So what I do is that I do a stop and chop in these cases. So I make an initial deep trench so that I'm able to separate the posterior plate. So that's my preferred technique. In very hard cataracts where direct chop is not possible, or maybe I have to manipulate a lot, instead of manipulating too much, I make a deep trench and I do a stop and chop so that I can separate the posterior plate.
Yeah, again, the question related to the rings and hook, I think they have.
Yeah, that I've already answered. Yeah,
yes,
thank you.
So that's the thing. So now I request, like, I think these are the questions which is there in the chat box, ma'am. So now I will just request other surgeons to just unmute yourself and ask any questions related to this topic. So you can please unmute yourself and you can just ask questions. Ma'am, there's one more question from Dr. Ankit Sawant. Sir, if you can unmute yourself and ask the question, it will be good, sir. Dr. Ankit. Yeah. So coming to the question, ma'am, injecting visco under iris, will it help in avoiding injury to capsule before inserting iris hooks?
Yes, thank you. That's a very good That's a very good idea. It definitely would help, and that should be done. I think all the surgeons can do that, in injecting, but you have to be careful not to inject too much because then the iris will be bowed up. But it's a very good idea, and we can do that definitely. It helps to protect the capsule.
Yeah, thank you very much, ma'am. So if there's any further questions, we'll just take it up because I think we have extended the time. So we'll just wait for maybe some more, maybe 10-15 seconds. Then if there's any questions, I request the surgeons to unmute yourself and ask it.
Hello, ma'am, I just wanted to ask you, like you were talking about the pupillary membrane. So
Yes.
How do you manage that in the surgical during the surgery?
Yes, thank you for the question, ma'am. See, when there is a pupillary membrane, so I should have shown actually that video. When we are separating the posterior syndicate, when I go with the iris spatula, so you have to find one place where the pupillary membrane is not there.
Okay.
Suppose if it's you don't find, if it's totally covering the pupil also with the iris spatula, if you try to just push the membrane, you will be able to break it. It's a very thin membrane. It's not a true membrane. It's the inflammatory cells and pigments that settle on the pupil. So it's not a true membrane actually. So even if you just try to dig it with a iris spatula, it will just break open, and then you can just make an entry point and remove the iris.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the question.
So is there any further questions? If there's any questions, you can unmute yourself and please ask, madam. So if there's no further questions, ma'am, from your side, if there are any key takeaway points, I know that you have mentioned the take-home messages, but if you want to just summarize today's session, or maybe 2 or 3 points if you want to highlight, so
Yes.
what would be, ma'am?
Sure. So maybe the most important thing that I would like to highlight is that as cataract surgeons, we are always in a hurry. So these are uveitic cataracts and combined cases. They need time and planning. So planning is the most important thing in these cases. Assess the case preoperatively, even on the day of surgery, before the patient is shifted to the operation theater. Please look at the patient on the slit lamp and make a mental plan before going in. That is the most important tip that I want to give from today's session. And in these cases, these are compromised eyes. These are eyes of patients with uveitis, and in combined cases, these are eyes of patients with diabetes. So please minimize the surgical trauma, and precision and accuracy in every step is important than a routine case, because complications in these cases are very, very unforgiving. That's the only thing I want to say, and thank you
Suhas,
for
Suhas,
attending
sorry.
the session.
Suhas,
Ma'am, yes.
there is one question from Dr. Sudhir Yadav. He couldn't post it in chat box.
Okay.
Can I ask on behalf of him?
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah. So his question is peripheral buttonhole iridectomy compulsory in every case?
Yeah, please carry on.
No, it's not compulsory in every case. See, once if you are making a sufficiently large rhexis, see what happens when the capsular rhexis is small, post-operatively, the iris can stick to the rhexis margin also. Then that becomes a problem. But if you have a large rhexis, so PI is not compulsory. But if suppose the patient is a glaucoma patient pre-operatively also, you know that the patient in those cases, you can make a small PI with a vitrector itself.
Thank you.
So you have to see every patient, you have to, there is no guideline on that every uveitic case needs a PI. But if you have if you're not able to make a big rhexis, it's better to make a PI.
Ma'am, do we have a time for a small question regarding the COVID scenario? Like, how does it complicate uveitic cataract?
See, COVID as such is thankfully not complicating the lives for uveitic patients, especially people who are on methotrexate. So there is nothing that extra that is happening in uveitic eyes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's a great answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Priya, for
Thank
your
you.
question. Yeah. So if there is no further question, then I think we would come to the end of this particular session. So I would like to thank Dr. Abhilasha for taking her time out and sharing her expertise on this excellent topic today. And also I would like to thank all the surgeons who had participated in this session and making it a very, very interactive and exciting one. So thank you very much, ma'am, once again.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
And thank you for all the doctors who have attended, and thank you J&J for organizing it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you, madam. It's wonderful talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Ma'am, thank you a lot, ma'am.
Thank you, doctor. Thank you very much.